Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this incredible event this afternoon. My name is Tess Jones. I'm the Associate Director of the Center for Bioethics and Humanities, which is housed in this building. And I'm the Director of the Arts and Humanities and Healthcare program here as well. And I'm so happy that you're here for this occasion. I want to say a few words about the Society for Humanism in Medicine, which actually sponsors this annual event. According to its history, somewhere around 1964, Dr. Lloyd Shields, clinical professor in the Department of OBGYN at the University of Colorado, and his wife Arlene invited colleagues and friends to their Aspen home for skiing, and I'm quoting, a new type of provocative and philosophical medical program, one that would unite scholarly wisdom with humanistic horizons. The Society of Humanism for Humanism in Medicine flourished for about 50 years until it was discontinued in 2012. And at that time, a committee came together and they reviewed proposals for the remaining assets of the organization, and an award was made to the Arts and Humanities and Healthcare program here at the Center for Bioethics and Humanities. And so we're the primary beneficiary of those funds. Our proposal included an annual symposium to preserve the legacy and the mission of the Society for Humanism in Medicine. So on behalf of the faculty and the staff here at the center, I want to express our appreciation for this honor and this opportunity. I also want to acknowledge the direct descendant of those two 1960s visionaries and skiers, Lloyd and Arlene, and that's Dr. Robert Shields, their son. So Bob has been very involved in creating our program this year, and we are indebted to him for recommending our speaker today, Hassan Latif. Hassan Latif knows firsthand how humanistic healthcare provides choice, empowerment, and quality of life for all individuals, but especially for those who have been incarcerated. After spending 18 years in Colorado State Prison, Hassan also had a transformative idea. Along with two colleagues, he established the Second Chance Center in 2012 to ensure that formerly incarcerated people will transition to lives of success and fulfillment by providing education, resources, and support. Second Chance is determined to reduce recidivism, reverse the negative impact of incarceration on communities, and protect future generations. So please welcome Hassan Latif.
Thank you, Ted. Excuse me. Good afternoon. Please give me a pass on the hat. I'm not trying for cool points. This is like Linus's blanket for me. I don't know why my stomach is flipping. I've worked rougher rooms than this before, but it's an honor to be here today. And this has been a pretty momentous day for myself and for Second Chance Center. I was telling Tess on the way here that just about an hour ago, I got a call from Governor Polis's office informing me that I had been appointed to the Clemency Board here in Colorado, which so I'm still trying to process that. But anyway, thank you for inviting me here today. I'd like to just start with a little narrative about Second Chance Center and what we're doing. And I would hope that you're comfortable enough during the course of the time that I'm here walking in circles looking at you. If you have questions, please, you don't have to hold them to the end. You could just fire them off at me, okay? All right, so Tess was right. You know, I started Second Chance Center in 2012. And for the first year, it was what I called a mobile unit in my car. And it was a process of myself begging my way into halfway houses in some of the prisons that I lived in Colorado, and basically just trying to connect and show people what I had to offer, as well as connecting to the folks that I knew were in need of not just the substance abuse kind of support that I was offering as an addictions counselor, but just the idea that someone was out here trying to put something together for them. A lot of people might think that when someone's released from prison, it's just one of those joyous kind of things where someone's so happy they just can't wait to get out of the gate. And for most folks, it's just the opposite that's actually true. There's a great degree of fear that comes with returning to community after incarceration, especially in particular for those who have spent longer and longer periods of time inside. It's the fear of once again failing, fear of not being able to adjust, the fear of the unknown in all of its manifestations. At Second Chance Center, we try to eliminate a lot of this by what we call role modeling possibilities, and in our approach to the work. One of the things, the basis of our work is the whole provider-recipient power dynamic. We reject that. Instead, we choose to partner with our folks. We understand we're the stewards of resources, but we don't want our folks to feel as though they have to come hat in hand to be helped. When they walk in the door, our expectations of them are different than others. We expect them to succeed. Our belief is that people live up to or down to expectations at times. And I say that because I was a child whose mother said to him on a number of occasions, "Did I clean it up or just say it, Imani?"
No.
"Nigga, you ain't worth a quarter." So no one should have been surprised when I acted like 20 cents. So we expect our folks to succeed, and we want to do everything we can to help them do that. So over the course of the last 6.5 years, after bringing on the first person I brought on, after getting connected to a small grant, 3 jobs weren't really doing the trick, was Sean Taylor, who caught a life sentence at age 17. The first day he ever pulled the trigger on a gun pointed at someone's house, killed a teenager his age. Spent 22 years inside. Wrote Governor Reenter after about 21 years, told him what he'd been doing inside, which was gang disengagement work. He was also teaching English as a second language, that kind of thing. And he wasn't doing any of this in an effort to get out. He was really trying to get right. The second gentleman, Adam Abdullah, who's our mentoring coordinator, I met him when I worked for another agency, the Turnabout program. Some of you may be familiar with it. And during a job readiness class, I saw this older gentleman. Actually, he was about just a year older than I am now. He was all whited out. And I thought it might be a challenge finding some work for him. So I came to him on the break and I said, "Brother, what kind of work, what kind of job are you looking for?" He said, "I'm not looking for a job. I just finished doing 33 years and 3 months for the federal government." And that's how long he had been inside. But he had a stack of certificates, including 2 associate's degrees. And I thought, what a waste of education and skills and wisdom. And if I ever found something he wouldn't consider a job, I would offer that to him. So it was the 3 of us, cumulatively holding 75 years of incarceration time. So quite naturally, people were wondering, what are these guys up to? I would have been wondering the same thing. So we were under a very huge microscope, and we felt as though all eyes were on us, and they were. But the benefit of it was that people not just got an opportunity not just to see what we did, our work, but they got to see about how we went about it. Here it is, seven years down the road. We're now a staff of 20, 10 of whom are formerly incarcerated persons. And we still operate like we don't get to say my bad. We still operate trying to be as transparent as possible, as disciplined as possible, And I think the reason why we continue to be blessed with opportunities is that our heart is in this work for real, and doing the best we can every day, and our folks are partnering with us in that way. Our recidivism rate over the last 5 years has been under 10%. This last fiscal year ending June 30th, it was 6.7 for that last year. And what this says is that people are trying harder than they ever tried before, for one, and that it doesn't really take a lot to assist someone reentering community. It really doesn't. It also says that it's prudent for the community to support an effort like this because it, first of all, is fiscally responsible. It costs about $38,000 a year to incarcerate someone in Colorado. I know they don't give Second Chance Center $38,000 per client. We do a lot with a lot less. There's a process for us developing this, what I would have to call a movement now, and I only do that because some of our folks call it that. And part of it had to do with us reaching out to community. At first, I used to say for a couple of years, I would say that we just kept our heads down and we stayed in our lane. By that, I meant we knew what we did and we felt pretty efficient at our jobs. But we didn't want to get drawn into this area and drawn into that area. We just wanted to stay where we were comfortable. But our folks didn't stay in their lane. Their needs went everywhere. And so even unofficially, our programming has been informed by client needs for a very long time now. And so we wound up doing some different things at Second Chance Center, and we're very proud of being able to help folks with family reintegration issues and that kind of thing. But when people ask us what we think is the most impactful part about our work, I think it's the cognitive restructuring work that we do with our folks. One, we have a team of care managers. We call them care managers at Second Chance Center because our folks have been cases all their life. We want to emphasize the care. But we operate on a very simple formula. It's called thoughts plus feelings equals behavior. Our belief being that one needs to actually come to grips in terms with how they think and how they got to think like that. And I mean, just that. How you got to think it's okay to put a gun in somebody's face and take what belongs to them. Or put your hands on somebody to resolve a conflict or take someone's property. How did you get to thinking like that? We want people to examine their feelings, and that includes how they feel about themselves, the world, and their place in it. We believe that unless you address those two parts of that equation, that any significant behavior changes won't be sustainable. So this is where our work comes in. And our mentoring curriculum is based on pretty simple steps. How you doing, Taj? I'm looking at that gentleman. I remember him when he was yay high in the penitentiary. I'm sorry to put you out there like that, but so I wrote this book in 2012 called Never Going Back, 7 Steps to Staying Out of Prison. The first step being own your own crap, which is about accountability, you know? And I didn't get to this place simply. Actually, I was in court every single day for the first 15 years I was in prison. I was either fighting a case or appealing a case. Went to the Colorado Supreme Court 7 different times. Went to the feds on 3 different occasions, all in an effort to prove that I had been wronged. And about 15 years in, I was sitting in my cell one day. I'm Muslim, and I was making my prayer, my salah. And there's a part of the prayer that's called dua, which is supplication. It's like an informal kind of get your beg on to God. And I couldn't think of what to say or what to ask. It's like in 15 years, I had ran out of schemes, I had ran out of ideas, I had ran out of plans, and all I was left with was the acceptance of the fact that they may have gotten this wrong and this wrong and this wrong, but they got the right guy. I needed to be stopped. I was running amok, and I wouldn't have done it on my own. that was more than an epiphany for me. It was sort of like a release for me. And it gave me an opportunity to start to look at self. This is one of the things we encourage our folks to do, to figure it out. And they need help with that. You know, we don't look for excuses for why folks do what they do. It lands them in prison or otherwise. But our belief is that there are usually reasons for why people wind up believing as they do, thinking as they do, and behaving as they do. One of the things I share in this book is a Kenyan proverb that the child is the father of the man and subsequently the mother of the woman. Basically saying that whatever it is we're exposed to or nurtured from as children impacts who we become as adults. That doesn't mean you can't have two twin siblings, and one go this way and another goes that way. It's not that simple. But for many of our folks, through this process of working with them, we found some things out. And one of the things we found out was the areas of our own deficiency. We took advantage of the fact that so many of us on staff had the common threads with our clients that we can understand them. You know, like no one can come into Second Chance Center and tell us anything about doing time. We know all about that. We got about 130 years cumulatively on staff. But it was more than that. We just took advantage of that to develop the kind of trust that's needed when you're asking people to delve into sometimes very dark and uncomfortable things about themselves, to acknowledge and accept some things about themselves, and then commit to doing something about it. Does that make sense? So what it wasn't like you go to a support group and we could check in with everyone at the end, are you okay, you okay, you okay? No, it was like Pandora's box. And the things that were shared with us and revealed to us really revealed how ill-equipped we were to deal with it. One thing about Second Chance Center is while we've been doing what we do and growing as we have, we've never waited for anyone to help us do what we thought needed to be done. We've always tried to find a way to step up as much as we could and address the needs of our folks. So we had two individuals with us who were with us at one time as interns. Matter of fact, it's sitting right there. That's Sandra and that's Justin. And they graduated with their degrees in mental health counseling. They're now in their master's program, so probably won't be able to afford to keep them very much longer. No, I'm just kidding. They're as dedicated to this as I am. But, you know, we were trying to shorten the span of time for referrals to places like Aurora Mental Health Center of Denver. Because when you have someone that's in crisis and they can't get in to see someone for 90 days or 120 days, this is critical time. This is the time when folks are most likely to fail, to reoffend, to relapse, these kind of things. And just this past year, with the help of Colorado Health Foundation, Colorado Trust, and Caring for Colorado, we were given funding to have on-site clinician. So not only do we have Sandra and Justin, but we have a gentleman who's on staff at Aurora Mental Health Center, but located at Second Chance Center. So we think that it's the perfect opportunity for us to, hey, I just keep seeing familiar faces of people I love. I'm sorry. So we think it's the perfect opportunity to develop that soft handoff, that soft bridge for those who might need more intensive kind of support than in an environment that would normally be very intimidating. So we're pretty pleased about that happening in this last year. So one of the things we're seeing now is that more and more folks are coming out after longer and longer periods of time with severe and persistent mental health issues, with substance use disorder histories. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir in this regard. The penal systems in America, departments of corrections in every state in America, are the dumping ground for folks with mental health issues. The dumping ground. And it's not a place where most folks will find the means to heal. In fact, it usually aggravates whatever it was that drove them to the behaviors that took them to prison. And if you manage to be one of those who wound up in prison and you actually didn't have any severe mental health issue, the likelihood is that when you come out, you're going to have something, PTSD at least. And we think the P ought to be changed from post-traumatic stress disorder to persistent, because our folks are not being triggered in here in the world. They're being continuously and repeatedly and consistently traumatized by the kind of things that they have to process coming back to community. And here's the thing, the people that we serve, they don't come off like a basket of puppies or something, so for some folks, it's not the easiest bandwagon to get on with support. But it only makes sense for community, because 98% of the people that are currently incarcerated will one day be back in community. So that means, I think, two things we should be concerned about. And that's what they have to endure while incarcerated and what kind of support is available for them when they come out. It's the kind of thing that, to me, is the only thing that makes sense. So that's what we're here to do. That's what we're dedicated to doing. I'm looking here. This is my wife, Imani. This beautiful. Actually, she actually was here on time. I've been saying this because I've been home 13 and a half years now. I promise you, she's trying to get 18 years back, 20 minutes at a time. I'm always waiting. And already she's gotten about 2.5 years back. So I'm glad you're here, man. And here's this thing. We were sitting across from each other in a little table about this wide in Centennial Correctional Facility about 8 years into our sentence. And she was telling me all these things about myself. She was telling me that I could be an author. She was telling me that I could be a substance abuse counselor, a counselor of any sort. She told me I could be happy, I could have a regular life. She told me I was beautiful. I bought that right away. But the rest of it, I really didn't have any frame of reference for. One thing I knew, though, is that she was there for me. She loved me. She had my best interests at heart. And I said to myself, I'm going to trust her vision until I can develop one for myself. This is kind of what we ask our folks to do, because some of our people can't see 5 years down the road. They can't see tomorrow in many instances. That's why we call some of what we do at Second Chance Center role modeling possibilities. And so we want folks to look at us and think, if they can do it, why can't I? Because this is the truth, with help. I'm sitting here looking at, this is Mr. Ken Gaper right here. I don't know if you guys know him, but when I came out, I didn't go straight home. I went to Pier 1. And he was the executive director of the program. And I remember coming there, and I was happy to be there, but I was nervous, like I told you all. I didn't really know what to expect. And I came down the steps my first full morning there. It was January 5th, 2006. And I was looking across the park, Logan. Isn't it Logan? Yeah, Fort Logan Park. And there were those who thought, because Pier 1 had denied me 3 times, I was persistent though. There were some who thought that I was making these kind of moves just to get out of prison. And I could see why they would think that. I had gone through a therapeutic community program my last 16 months inside. It was a perfect kind of a setting for me because they separated us from the general population, which provided for the safest environment I had known in almost 2 decades. So just not having to look at my back, I had a chance to actually look in the mirror, and I had folks that were professional and committed and caring to help me do that. And so I was able to connect a few dots. And when I came out, I came to Pier 1, where once again, I was put in an environment that was designed to test certain things about oneself and to also enhance the skill sets that would be used and needed going forward. So I'm looking at him now because I didn't see any of this. There are people laying in prison right now on their backs, thinking of wonderful things that they want to do when they get out, you know, to give back to the community, to build something, to develop something. I wasn't that guy. I didn't know what to expect. When I went in prison, Ronald Reagan was president. When I came out, George Bush was rounding out his second term. You know, so I had that kind of anxiety around around what was possible. I thought I was too old to go back to school. Three things I committed myself to because I felt that I had what it would take to follow through with those. One, I wasn't going to get high. And I started using when I was 5 years old in Brooklyn. I hear that. I usually hear that. People wonder how you start getting high at 5. Well, the answer is with the help of adults. Also, I said I wasn't going to commit anything resembling a crime. And I'm a black man in America. I still do not even buy bootleg DVDs. I'm really serious about that. And I was going to work hard. The rest of it has just been a process of managing opportunities that come my way. But here's one thing that was really very significant. And when I first got out and had my first parole officer, I think he made it his mission to make me as miserable as possible when I was in his office and make things as difficult as possible. I say that because he made it clear to me on day one with my wife sitting right next to me. He pointed his finger in my face and said, the first chance I get to send you back to prison, that's where you're going. And when he said that, I said something that I learned at Pier 1. I said, okay. I didn't say okay because I was all right with it. I didn't say okay because I didn't think it was disrespectful or unnecessary, because I did. I said okay because I understood him. He made himself clear. And he also put the ball in my court because he said the first chance I give him. So that meant what? Exactly. Yeah, but so I finally one day, I get a job offer after about 3 months of looking, and I call him. I'm pretty excited because I want to get him off my back. I tell him I've been offered this job at a community health agency in 5 Points. He says, give me the number. He don't know that I'm still there. So he calls in, and the gentleman who interviewed me, Jeff Bard, he put it on speaker. He said, this man is this, this, and this. He's done this, that, and the other. Why would you hire him? And the first thing I'm thinking is, damn, I'm glad I was honest. You know, but I was shook. And Jeff said to him, well, in this community and at this agency, that's a resume. And it was, yeah, wow, for me too. It was a quantum kind of shift in my thinking because at the time, I was committed to doing what I needed to do to succeed out here and to transition successfully. But I did feel like I had this burden that I was going to be carrying with me, this past, this record, this scarlet letter. Our people feel like that too. Like no matter what they do, people are always going to process them through those filters. They're always going to see them the same way. And for me, it made me look back over my entire period of incarceration, as well as those years of developing into that person, to actually see what it is I gained, what I learned, what I was trying to cover up for, what I was trying to white knuckle my way through. And some of those things that I learned about myself are the same kind of things we're trying to help navigate our folks through. I mean, prison is one thing, but when you're locked into your own head, locked into your own heart, and you don't see an out, it's really difficult for someone's life to change in any significant way. We have people now who have cycled in and out of incarceration all their lives. We've serviced 3 generations of the same family. There has to be a reason for this. It has to be a reason for this. Generational incarceration sometimes is a result of family, mental health issues, behavioral issues that have just never been addressed. When we started doing this work and folks started trusting us with this process, we learned things about our clients that were horrific. When they started talking about adverse childhood experiences, I think they need to come up with even a more descriptive word for the kind of things children have survived. And I think there's, and some of you in this room probably know better than I, but my belief is that it's a blessing for children to be able to shut off parts of their mind to certain things because they can't deal with it anyway at that time. Those things sometimes are reawakened over the course of their lives, sometimes when they're in a better position to deal with it, and sometimes they're still not in a better position to deal with it. Wind up doing the kind of things people do when they're struggling and hurting, and a lot of that is self-medicating. And a lot of that is toxic kinds of relationships. And so these are the things, this is the fuel for criminality and the fueling of penitentiary systems. You know, one of the things we sought to do, and I think we have in some significant ways, is get the larger community to expand their perception about who we are and what our issues are. And at the same time, we're trying to dispel the lies that have been told to our folks perhaps most of their lives, and that they've told themselves, even after people have stopped saying it to them. Like they're not deserving or worthy or that kind of thing. We combat all of that. And it doesn't take a lot. When you talk about humanistic approaches to this kind of work, sometimes someone being kind for no reason, and this is something because this program that I was in Canyon City, it was run by a woman named Tanya Garcia, little Puerto Rican lady about this tall. And for 6 months, we banged heads and locked horns because nothing I said was acceptable to her. And I thought she hated me. I knew that I hated her. But once I started connecting some dots, her approach to me became an embracing one. And I realized that she had been banging with me for me. That's what that was all about. She wasn't trying to accept any of my representation about my own self-image. She wasn't trying to hear about excuses or, that's not what she was trying to do. She was trying to get me to turn inward and look at me. And so by the time I got ready to be released on January 4th, 2006, I was in love with Tanya. I mean, this was someone who had given me what I thought would take me through what I was getting ready to face walking out these gates. And I was standing down there waiting for her to come in. She was late for work. I don't think she'd ever been late the whole time I was there. And I'm standing out. It was snowy. It was sleeting. I was wet, cold. And finally, she comes mobbing in. And I step to her, and I'm trying to thank her, basically. I can't come up with a coherent sentence. I'm babbling, I'm crying, and I don't just mean tears falling out my eyes. I mean bubbles out the nose kind of crying. It was horrible. And she took pity on me. She reached up and tapped me on the shoulder, and she said, "Just be kind to people." Like if I wanted to pay her back, just be kind to people. I think, because I think about that every day. Every day I hear her say that. And some days I need to remind myself about it because some days it's more difficult to be kind. But I always go back to that as a default. And it's the kind of thing we try to do with our folks. We get a lot of mileage out of that. Someone cares enough. And please, if you have any questions for me, just shoot them out, because if not, I'll just keep going. Here's this thing. Sometimes people do the kind of things that hurt themselves, and you wonder why they do it. Our folks wonder that too. We started doing work talking with our folks in our mentoring groups and things about traumatic brain injuries. And the correlation between attentional, the attentional effects and the behavioral effects of traumatic brain injuries. Most people think when they hear that, somebody getting their head split open on a motorcycle without a helmet, but really, y'all know it's not like that. It's just sometimes a mild interruption in consciousness as a result of some kind of a blow. Many of our folks, probably many people in this room, have experienced parental discipline, hand or fist or some blunt object. That's not your experience. I'm glad that it isn't. When we started talking about these kinds of things and sharing this information with our folks, lights started coming on. Because trust me and believe me, people that are going in and out of these kinds of environments and situations, there's some point where each of us has sat with our head in our hands, asking ourselves, what the f is wrong with me? And we're trying to let our folks know that it might not be that something's wrong with you. It might be what's happened to you. Some of these things we're talking about in the earliest years of development actually changed a person's brain, literally. And I know you people in this room know more about that than me. But this is the kind of thing we try to tell them. If we can acknowledge these things about ourselves, these deficits, these gaps, these lapses, that there are ways to compensate for a lot of them. That's what we try to do as well, to help our folks do that. So I try to explain this process to our folks, and sometimes I have to do it in stories. This one my wife says is disgusting, but I'm getting ready to tell you all anyway. So I'm sitting in the penitentiary, and probably the year maybe 1998, and we're on lockdown in Centennial for some event. I don't know what it was. And I'm sitting there in my cell, and I have these tweezers, and they're really industrial kind of tweezers. So I know they were stolen from the medical department some kind of way. How I got them, I don't know. But I'm looking at these tweezers, and I'm looking at my feet, and I get the idea that I'm going, you know, I never had a pedicure, but I'm going to work on my cuticles. I'm going to do some stuff like that. And as I'm busying myself with that and losing myself in thought, I started digging into the inside back corner of my big toe nail. Started digging. And at first, it was a little painful when I first started, but that numbed up pretty quick. Got used to it. It was a little blood, but it didn't turn me. Kept digging and thinking about what I was thinking. After a while, I looked, and that inside back corner of my toenail was curled up. And I thought to myself, these are some really good tweezers. I bet I could grab that and snatch the whole nail off. And so it didn't sound like a great idea to me. You know, I thought there might be some discomfort involved, but that didn't stop me either. I grabbed one end of it and tested it for, you know, the grip, and then I snatched it off. And yes, it was like that. It was blood, it was pain, it was, you know, me questioning my own self at that time. And when I finally got off lockdown and limped into the visiting room that weekend, my wife immediately, she sees me and she's probably thinking that, you know, I got into a fight or something. She's like, what happened? What happened? So I told her what happened. I told her what I did. And she looked at me and like, why would you do something like that? And my response was just immediate. I said, because it felt so good when I stopped. And I thought that it would probably grow back really grotesquely. You know, I had pictures in my mind of the Wizard of Oz when that house fell down on the witch and a foot curled up there. But about 6 months later, couldn't tell any difference between that and my other toe. And then we were locked up again. And I still had these tweezers. I don't know why. That's probably appropriate. So I'm looking down at my foot. I'm remembering 6 months earlier. And I did the same thing again. And here's the point that I want to make and that I make with our folks. I didn't know exactly how painful it was going to be the first time, you know. I had an idea, but it wasn't even close. But that time I knew exactly how painful it would be. I knew exactly how much it would hurt. I knew exactly how long it would take for me to recover from it. And I did it again. But I try, and what we try in our work to get folks to do is to see the kind of things they've done to harm themselves, to understand their loved ones who look at them and expect them to do perhaps similar things. You know, I don't know if anyone in this room has loved ones who've been incarcerated, but if you have, you probably have that trepidation about their return, scared for them to go back to what they were doing before, you know? But one thing that I found out, and what I said to my wife that was really flippant, is really true, that it does feel so good when you stop. Stop hurting yourself. Stop putting yourself at risk. And when people can recognize this for themselves, not some mandated program kind of thing, but when people can see that for themselves, it makes sense. Who wants to keep hurting? Yeah, I'm feeling some kind of way right now, and I apologize. That's one thing about this work. It keeps it green for those of us on staff who have had this experience. But there's also the transference that comes with working with people who are struggling. And some of you know that from your work. Others will when you get out there. And it's the thing that makes self-care so important. Because the only thing you have to give is what you have. That is if you take care of self. Keep people nodding their heads so you understand that. And, so let me just tell you a couple of exciting things that are happening with us. We're building a permanent supportive housing project now in Aurora. For those who know Aurora, it's on Alameda Parkway. It's about 2 blocks east of Chambers, right next to Tollgate Creek, and right behind Elevation Christian Church. And this is a low-income housing tax credit project that we embarked on in 2016. And I'm looking at my watch. Somebody should probably keep a hook close by. But one of the biggest issues and challenges for our population is housing. It's always been. And it's been the practice of the Department of Corrections and others for as long as I know to temporarily house folks in motels up and down Colfax, where you can literally open the door at 11 o'clock at night and be confronted with whatever triggered your worst decisions in life. And we were sending people there as well because we didn't have options, and we were sending them to shelters. Some of our folks literally cannot live in shelters. They can't be in those kinds of spaces for many reasons. So what we started doing was trying to find ways to address this. The housing situation is so bad in Metro Denver that the Division of Adult Parole has relaxed the association restriction. By that I mean there was a time when if you associated with another person on parole, you could be revoked and sent back to prison. They no longer do that. And as a result, there are property owners that are shoving as many formerly incarcerated persons as possible into their properties. So sometimes 6, 7 people in a 2-bedroom house. We were sending people there as well because we didn't have choices. And one day there was someone got shot and killed at one of these homes. We had 3 clients there. Thank God none of them were involved and they were all at work. But I went to the scene, and this happened up in the kitchen. I go in the basement with the owner, and there's a partition that doesn't go quite to the ceiling. And on either side of it are two bunk beds about 8 inches off the ground. And they looked like they had the kind of mattresses we slept on inside, about that big. And it was filthy. And I asked him if it looked like that would move people in. And he looked at me incredulous, like, yeah, why? Well, the why was that it looked worse than upstairs where somebody got shot in the head. I left there thinking, one, these people should be put out of business. And two, we can't send anybody there anymore. For some, they don't see anything wrong with conditions like that. They're just people coming out of prison. It's an upgrade. No, it's not. It's not an upgrade. It's an affirmation or a reaffirmation of someone's lack of value. Someone's less than. So we started asking folks to master lease to us if they weren't comfortable leasing to us. We furnished those places ourselves with furniture donated from community. I mean, right to putting food in the refrigerators. Because some of our folks have no baseline, really, for how to live on their own. We have folks we're dealing with that went into foster care, that went into juvenile corrections, that went to the penitentiary, that came out to the halfway house, and then come into Second Chance Center. So we set folks up like that. And then someone came to me once with this idea about permanent supportive housing in June of 16. I never heard this concept before, but it's about housing with the support people need right there. I thought it was a great idea. People were very discouraging about the idea. They said, no one gets tax credits on the first try. And like I said, our population is in a basket of puppies, so nobody's gonna be interested in providing resources to build something for this population. Well, all those things turned out not to be true. We weren't dissuaded by that because so many things we've done at Second Chance Center have never been done before. So we felt like, oh, why not? It's just another thing. So we were awarded in 2017, September, and we broke ground January 4th this year. And our completion date, which we have every confidence we're gonna make, is the 4th of February, 2020. And we'll have 50 individuals and families. Yeah. So here's this other thing. Sometimes the kind of thing that fuels people's healing is hope. And that might sound like some Hallmark card-ish kind of thing, but it's real, you know? And when we say we partner with our folks, that's real too. Because in 2014, we helped pass our first piece of legislation that mandated the Department of Corrections allocate a percentage of their budget to community-based organizations. We were also smart enough to write into the law intermediary. So we didn't have to work for the Department of Corrections and they didn't get a chance to starve us to death. But this program wasn't very well received at first because the department felt as though their budget had been hijacked. And it really had. But by the time it came up for sunset review, which in Colorado, if you pass a piece of legislation into law that has a financial tag to it, after 4 years or so, they send an auditor around from the Department of Local Affairs. They do an audit of the program and they come back to the legislature and they tell them whether or not this should be funded or defunded. Well, by the time we came around for sunset review, sitting next to me and others at the table testifying for the bill to renew was the director of the Division of Adult Parole. So in less than 4 years, we had gone from being somewhat adversarial in our relationship to finding a way to work together. This is another example for our folks when we talk about role model and possibilities, that sometimes even those that you thought of historically as adversaries, that you can find ways to work together, especially if you have to. And so as a result of that bill being renewed, it was refunded for 5 years. The resources for it were tripled. And now there are 18 entities funded through this wages program in Colorado. So some of the rural areas that were very difficult for us to even get to, now people coming out in these places have some help there. And our people feel a part of that. They feel like they've fueled that, and they did, because we point to their successes, and that gives us the next opportunity. This year, 9 pieces of criminal justice reform legislation were passed into law, signed into law by Governor Polis. And he came to our house to sign them. And for us, that was huge. One of them was returning the voting rights to over 11,000 folks on parole. I don't know how some people feel about that. Some municipal elections are won or lost on a couple of dozen votes. So engaging this number of new voters is liable to have some impact here in Colorado. I'm excited about the idea. I know 2 of the things that I want to do when I got off parole is, one, I want to register to vote, and I want to get a passport. I sat with Imani at Mile High Stadium in 2008 for the Democratic National Convention, and we were one of the first ones there, thinking that being Muslim, we might have to go through a little more extensive kind of search process. We didn't, but we were there so early, we got to see about 80,000 people come into this place over the course of the afternoon. And the most amazing thing for me wasn't Stevie Wonder or Sheryl Crow. It was the fact that it didn't seem like anybody was strangers. You know, it was that kind of hopeful, energetic atmosphere. And I was sitting there thinking, damn, I wish I could vote. And this is someone who had been a cynic about politics all my life. But to me, it said, registering to vote said that I was actually a part of this thing. You know, my citizenship was real, and I was going to represent that in every way possible. The thing about the passport was it said to me the world was open to me. All I had to do was work for it. Now, I was in front of a group of folks at the penitentiary, so a little bit different than this setting. This is fly, let me just tell you. This rotunda is kind of nice. But I was sitting and talking to these guys, and we were talking about the recovery process for some folks, especially those who were seriously addicted to alcohol or other drugs. And that once you stop this, it's almost like a breakup, you know, with a loved one, with a significant other. I mean, certainly a dysfunctional relationship, but that hasn't stopped people from going back to toxic relationships before. And the same thing is with someone who's addicted to drugs. And so I tell them that you have to replace it, find a way to replace it with some things. So a lot of times what folks are doing are trying to fill spaces that are empty and not knowing why they are. That's part of our work as well, trying to help people figure out what's missing. So I told them that for me, I started collecting stamps. So a couple of people laughed. I said, well, that's corny, right? So he said, yeah, kind of corny. I said, well, I collect them on my passport, dude. And then everybody was like, ooh. but this is the point we try to make for our folks. You know, you have the opportunity to build a life for yourself, and it can be more than you ever imagined. And so that's our payoff. Our payoff is when someone comes to Second Chance Center and they have their first car, and it might be painted 4 different colors, but they got their own insurance, their registration is legit, and they got a license and they want us to know about it. Or they come through with their discharge papers from parole when they've never been able to get off parole in 40 years without going back to prison. And they come through with that paper like it's a degree from MIT. And they should feel like that, because some of them have worked most of their life to achieve that. And we applaud that. We applaud every step that they make, everything that's positive. We acknowledge if we can, if we know about it, and then we put the onus on them to reach back. And this is another thing that's valuable. People feeling as though they have something to give. So that peer-to-peer kind of mentoring thing is crucial for our folks' success. Urge that. And so here's where we are now, 7.5 years into this thing. Someone asked me, first parked the car, actually moved into what I call a walk-in closet. It really wasn't that small, but right next to my wife's agency, It Takes a Village. And someone asked me what I saw for Second Gen Center in 5 years. That's that 5-year question. You know, I still have some feelings about that. But what I said is that I wanted us to be the preeminent reentry agency in the state and a model for the country. And I asked if that was too grandiose. His name was John Riley. He said to me, if you're not thinking like that, you probably don't have what it takes to get this job done. So here we are now. Colorado is being looked at as a model for how this work can be done differently. What does different look like is the question that we want people to ask. Because clearly the way it's been going, you know, just for instance, in 1970, from 1972 to present, the rate of women incarcerated in the United States has risen 674%. 674%. When you incarcerate women, you have a direct impact on children. So this cycle continues. Excuse me? Well, you know, we really, the bulk of our folks are 18 and over, but now we have people trying to reintegrate with their families, and they have teenagers who are struggling. So we've had to try to get involved in some ways to help that. It's not something that's a part of our program, but it's our support of our folks who are going through that kind of stuff with their kids. Yes. Well, that's a good question. You know, people talk a lot about the school to prison pipeline, and there's a lot of evidence to establish that, not the least of which is the policing that goes on in public schools right now. But there's the sexual assault to prison pipeline as well. People aren't really talking about that. But 85% of women that are currently incarcerated were victims of sexual assault as children, teenagers, or women, adults. So, and a lot of the folks, the women that we serve, they go to prison for crimes that are directly related to poverty in an effort to take care of children on their own. A lot of them go to prison for conspiracy cases that have to do with a man that placed them in a position where they wind up holding the bag. In Colorado, we're trying to figure out why the rate of new incarcerated women has gone up 40% in the last 2 years. We're trying to figure out why that really is, and see if we can do something about that. Excuse me? Well, you know, like I said, a lot of them catch drug cases. Yeah, same offenses. You know, it's just there's no consideration for the impact on children, and most of them have minor children that wind up getting incarcerated. So it's just kind of, you know, some people think and they say, excuse me? Yeah, some people say that the system is broken. I don't think it is. I think it's working exactly how it was designed to work. And it's a diabolically ingenious business plan. And it starts from the end of so-called the end of slavery to Jim Crow to all of the things that led to mass incarceration and led us to where we are now. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Oh, I literally have to hold it down. I got it. I wanted to ask, among the people in your program, what civil legal services are in demand? I'm imagining for like debt issues, child custody, divorce, that kind of stuff.
Well, that's a great question. A lot of our folks now have tremendous restitution accounts that they got maybe 15, 20 years ago that have continuously been collecting interest. So some they'll never be able to pay that off. We have a lot of folks that are trying to get custody of their children again. And so what we've done is we funnel people to clinics that help. We have now trying to develop and are developing a group of lawyers willing to do pro bono work on this sort of thing. We don't get involved in people rehashing the cases that took them to prison. That's not what we do. But for people to try to resort to straightening out their credit, for instance, and those kind of things, we steer them towards. We don't do it ourselves, but we certainly guide them to people that we've vetted and we're comfortable that are going to do what needs to be done. So are you offering some services like that? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, please do. Please do. And that's what these opportunities kind of present to us, is a chance to get with community and express our needs. And every time we've done that, someone stepped up. It started like that from the beginning. I promise you, I was working for this place, and I'm looking at my watch test. I was working for a turnabout program, and it was the first opportunity that I got to learn how to do case management work. And I used to see people coming in and cycling in and out of prison over the 4 or 5 years I was with them. And they would always say the same thing to me. Hassan, everything was going great. I was making $20 an hour. I had my own place. I was back with my kids. And then, like, this miraculous thing happened and the bottom fell out. Well, I knew it didn't happen like that. But I didn't really feel the confidence that it would take for someone to say, hey, we should be doing it this way. And, you know, I didn't feel it like that. But the recidivism rate was about the same at the time, 50%. DOC expected it, and the people that I worked for accepted it. I had a problem with both of those things. But I didn't have, like I said, the confidence to say, hey, we should be trying this. Well, that was taken out of my hands because we were in a staff meeting one day and 3 board members came and said, we're closing the program in 4 days. Most people were panicked. Why wouldn't you be? I mean, it was 70% of my income. I was an addictions counselor at the time, so I was doing some work on the side, but that's a big chunk of my income. But I was also at a place in my life where I asked myself, well, what does this really mean? As opposed to thinking it was all bad. So I came up with 2 things. One was, I started writing a book 4 years earlier, hadn't written a word in 2.5 years. So finish what you started, dude. Time for a shameless plug. And the other one was, if you think you know how to do this better, if you think you know how we might be able to get some better results, stop being scared. So I sat in my house thinking about it for a while. I go to the Secretary of State's website a couple of months later, and I'm filling out all the forms to start this organization. But that self-doubt kind of thing that we're talking about was still there for me. I couldn't hit the submit button. My wife was in her office working, and I called her into the living room and I showed her what I was working on. I said, you really think I can do this? And she was like, sure. So I hit the button. Another example that we take into this work. Sometimes we got to have confidence in our folks when they don't have it. They got to let them know they can when they're not sure. You know, that's the kind of stuff that's needed. Yes. Someone? Yes.
Hello.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So speaking about like all of obviously like the barriers, like once folks are like back in the community, like I know that Denver Health had started a transitions clinic specifically for folks I think coming from DOC, but that's really recent, I know.
Yeah,
but could you speak more to like, especially, I don't know how many people are here on the medical side of things, like what I can assume, and I've read about like what's needed, but like what has been the experience in Colorado? Because I know that there are some other states that have a little bit more of like a transition support, medically speaking.
Yeah. Well, one, I'm very pleased with that clinic opening up, and you know, there was a time, especially for folks who were in a halfway house, that they could not access Denver Health, South Street Clinic, or anything like that because of the fact that they were on what was called inmate status and still the property of the Department of Corrections. So we had people literally going back to prison for trying to get to a dentist or trying to, you know, deal with some issue. So what we see a lot with our folks are people coming out with issues around high blood pressure, diabetes that's been untreated or ill-treated inside, a lot of physical issues that come as a result of aging and incarceration, basically. Acute arthritis. We're not talking about mental health and that. We're talking about physical health, is what you asked me about. Yeah, so dental issues, a pretty big thing for our folks. I think Colorado is, especially Denver Metro, is ahead of the game right now with that clinic opening up. So we're just trying to funnel our folks and encourage them to engage. Like sometimes it's cultural too. Like some people, they never show up until it's beyond being able to control. You know, Black people in particular, you know, they show up late. Usually it's further along than necessary. We have a lot of cancer that we're seeing now as well. And so you had a, no.
What's the feedback that you've been having from your folks, like from your, like if they've been accessing that care, like has that been like an overwhelming positive? Has it been kind of like rough to get people started in it?
Well, yeah, both, because sometimes we have to actually literally walk people to care, to get them engaged. I mean, literally walk them in. Because if you walk into a hospital and the first thing you encounter is a reception staff person that is less than cordial, that is, you know, whatever, it's enough to turn some of our folks right around and say, forget about it. You know, so we've done that. We also have folks that have gotten the care that has saved their lives, literally. I'm sure happy that they got out in a chance, a timely manner to do that. So we have, like I told you, this is Justin and Sandra. Yo, you got anything you can add about folks you're dealing with right now, helping?
I think a lot of the problems that people coming out of prison are experiencing finding healthcare, and I say this as a guy who came out of prison with diabetes, are the same kind of problems that all people below a certain income experience in this country, right? Like accessing Medicare when you've never used a computer is really difficult, and they're supposed to be enrolled in Medicare while they're in prison. They're usually not. And so once you get out, you have a small list of providers for some serious issues, and you're released with 30 days of medication for whatever you had going on. 30 days is oftentimes not enough time to see anybody. So there's a lack of easy access to care, for sure.
We're hoping that clinic and some other things that are being developed are going to help folks with that. Now they are actually doing a better job in DOC of registering folks for Medicare or for Obamacare. So sometimes it's just getting people to access what's available to them, not just for medical, but all kinds of other support. Asking for help is one of the most difficult things for some of our folks, especially with the belief that nobody really cares, you know. And that's a lie we dispel every day with our community coming to support us. Huh? You had a question?
I was going to say,
yeah.
Denver Health and
And that's, my wife found it takes a village. And so, you know, people are tested when they come into prison for HIV and other things. They're not tested leaving out. And my belief is that part of that is the department trying to insulate itself from the responsibility of folks who contract certain diseases while they're incarcerated.
How many clients do you have a year? How many people come through your program?
Well, we have about 1,300 client visits a month. Last year we dealt with almost 1,250 separate individual unique clients over the course of the year. We feed about 60 people a day at the center as well. We do that with the help of a nonprofit called We Don't Waste. They're like food rescuers. Yeah, some of you might have heard of them. They've rescued 29 million meals. For those who don't know, 40% of the food produced in America winds up in landfills. And that's a crime. You had a question, sis? Okay, well, let's see. Yes, ma'am.
Thought questions. It would seem to me, as you so effectively said, and part of what these people need as they heal is to feel they have something to give. That you can, among all of your clients, recruit people to work with new people coming out. And I wonder if this is something that could multiply on itself. And I wonder if you're doing that? And if it does, my second question is talking about the impact on families. Is it similar to Al-Anon? There could be a side program that's not yours, which is dealing with people coming out of incarceration, but a side program like Al-Anon is for dealing with the families. And my third one is, now that we are finally into what is called prison reform in releasing so many people who should not have been incarcerated or incarcerated for nearly as long as they are, we are creating a huge need for precisely the kind of work you're doing. All these people are going to go right around, and it'll be a turntable. Yeah. So can you speak a little bit about those three other possibilities, and if there's something that is workable?
I'll try to do my best. The first thing, we think that the common factor between criminality and incarceration is in abuse, substance abuse in particular, is based in selfishness. It's like about me and getting mine. So we think the medicine for that is the reverse, is to do selfless things. So we have what we call FORCE, Former Offenders Reintegrated for Community Enrichment. It's the community service arm of our agency. And what we try to do is put people in positions where they can give back to the community. And one reason is because it fuels that thing, that selfless thing. But also people find themselves in a position where they're being appreciated by someone for something that they did, and that's important, you know. And so, and yes, this does go on. Like when we tell our folks, when we send them someplace for a job interview and they get hired, they don't have to come back and tell us how grateful they are. We know they're grateful. We're happy for you. But what we do need from you is to be a good employee, so that when something opens up, your boss will say, hey, I need someone, you'll call us because you know we got someone. If we get you in housing, you don't have to come back and polish our boots or clean our cars. But what you have to do for us is be a good tenant and a good neighbor. And so this does perpetuate. We put the onus on our folks to make this thing, to keep it moving. And they've lifted that mantle up. I'm very proud of the efforts of most of our folks who have lifted that mantle up. And now what you're talking about, the kind of reforms, the sentencing reforms, we've been involved in a lot of those kinds of things. And it's gonna seem to some or sound to some like an overwhelming thing, like they're gonna open the doors and the floodgates of people. But that's not really how it's happening. What's really happening is that 800 people a month are being released from prisons in Colorado, and 150 of them are being released homeless. You know, so for souls just to think about that. At Second Chance Center, we have washer and dryer so people can wash their clothes if they're living in a shelter or they're living in a motel or they're living in a halfway house. Because you start talking about decent treatment and the humanity of things. Well, for folks to be able to clean themselves properly and address their hygiene needs, I mean, that's important. And so we try to get involved with all of that kind of stuff. What I'd like to see, and I'm not an abolitionist, okay? I got friends who want to shut down all the prisons and get rid of all the police. That's not me. I actually go into prisons and I'll say to folks, everybody in here knows at least one person that should never walk the world free again. Heads are nodding. And then I'll say, if you don't know that person, you're probably that person. So, but like I said, 98% of them are going to be coming home one day. I didn't see it out myself. You know, I had a lot of time to start with. Some of it I gave back through the Court of Appeals, but most of it I just was able to leave the Department of Corrections by getting an opportunity to come to Pier 1 and not looking back after that. So, yes, sir.
In dealing with offenders, the mentality was just getting out. That mentality has changed. It's not just getting out, it's staying out. Now the emphasis on staying out is on everybody in this room. It is the community, because the community has to step up to help people stay out. So you talked about the importance of welcoming people. You talked about clinics. meeting people's needs. You talked about housing. You talked about employment, mental health services, support groups, AA, NA. It really does take a community. So if we expect people to stay out, there has to be that warm handoff to something. If there's nothing there, people are going to say, hey, why come out? I'm probably better off going back in. I have a place to stay. Somebody regulates my life. I know at least I eat 3 meals a day and I sleep with one eye open, and I know how to look at my own back. So the emphasis is really on the community. And a lot of people have stepped up. It's amazing because everybody here knows somebody with a mental health issue, alcoholism, substance abuse, and if it's somebody in your family, is it that easy to say, send them to jail, send them to prison? So even in presentations, it's bringing that human face to an audience, and most people shake their head because they know somebody who's struggling, and how do you want that person to be met?
You know, I had this experience at Pier 1. They used to have something that they used to send out, the barbecue, to raise money for the program, and we would barbecue turkey legs and a bunch of other stuff. And they allowed me to go out most weekends, and I enjoyed it. Even when I got a job and started working, I would still go out on the weekends. And it was my first experience, like talking publicly with people that I didn't know. And they wanted to know about the program, and I almost to a person. That's why I know to this day there's not a family in America that isn't touched by mental health issues, substance abuse issues, abuses of one sort or another, not one. And talking to folks at the barbecue was healing and encouraging for me, because I didn't feel that different from, and I think that's one of the things that we've been able to do to get the community to support us, is getting people to look at the commonalities as opposed to the things that are different. And like sometimes my wife would say, give me those glasses. And unbeknownst to me, you know, there was like some donut glaze on it or fingerprint. I mean, it looked fine to me. But by the time she cleans them up and gives them back to me, it's like, you guys look great a minute ago. But now it's like HD. Well, we think people's eyes are the same way. And you have to kind of find a way to clean those lenses up. Because if you process new information through old filters, you know, it's liable to look the same. You're liable to feel the same way about it and respond the same way to it. This is not rocket science. This is kind of like simple kind of things. And so we try to keep it simple. And,
Hassan, could you explain to this audience about the I Live program?
About who?
The I Live program.
Oh.
How that's meant.
Would you like to?
Weekly, every Saturday, I'm actually a client of the Second Chance Center. On work options for women through the Second Chance Center. It's a culinary program. I also recently got promoted to vice president of the advisory committee, so that's
hey.
a plus. Yeah. But we're actively involved in raising a productive members of society out of felons that are coming out of prison. And we meet weekly on Saturday, 10 to 12, and it's a group of formerly incarcerated individuals. We get together and we share our concerns, our progress, our struggles together, and that unification, that's more uplifting and encouraging than most any treatment I've ever been in. I've been in and out of prison for over 20 years, California, Arizona, and Colorado. And the brotherhood, just the fellowship I experienced through the I Live program, it's inspiring leaders, influencing visions of excellence. So we come together and it's a meeting of the minds, and we share, and it's I take home a lot from that weekly, every week.
Good, thank you, Rob.
So, Hassan,
yes.
I think our time is up with you.
Oh, well.
I know, but if you would stay for a few minutes, I know many people have many things that they want to say to you, but just let me say simply thank you so much for the work you're doing.
Appreciate you.
This has just been wonderful. Thank you.
What'd you say? I'm going to turn this mic off so I can talk to my wife.